USA. And then later, Dr. Moni gained her master's in law at the University of London in the UK. I have to say, when I read all this, I was, extremely impressed and, amazed in terms of the ability to attract such masterful and honourable guests. Dr. Moni is the Education Minister for Bangladesh, but she was also previously the Minister for Foreign Affairs and the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Human Rights. She's also a Supreme Court lawyer in Bangladesh. Dr. Moni is a keen advocate for brain injury care, neuro rehabilitation services, long COVID, and human rights. And we appreciate very much the support that she provides for Dr. Sakel and the Kent Brain Injury Foundation. So we are deeply honoured with her kind presence and thank her for being here. And indeed, well, I hope that one day she can come to Canterbury as well. Sashi.
Yes, absolutely. That's for Mohamed to organize the business class flight straight to Canterbury. Thank you. It's great. So Mo,
right. Okay. So good evening. Thanks to our chief guest, Dr. Dipu Moni, and our special guest, Professor and Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Shafuddin Ahmed, and another Honorable Vice Chancellor will also speak as a presenter. And I'm grateful to Susan Aikot, our CEO, kindly join us on a Friday evening. Right, from the very beginning of the pandemic, we focused on considering the unequal impact that this pandemic would have. That's the thought we had in about April or May. I think I was taking a TV interview and this thought came out. And the reason for that is the rhetoric that we are all on the same boat. Therefore, there will be no discrimination of any sort. That will not how things will pan out, and that's not the way how things have panned out. For example, in our previous program, we have found or demonstrated that thousands of prostate cancer patients have died unexpectedly or more than usual. So similarly, there are certain vulnerable groups which we need to be cognizant of for future pandemic response, as well as when we are emerging out of the pandemic, to think about resource allocation and service development. So today we will have 4 presentations where there are extra special difficulties and which we would implore people to hold into. So, and another outcome of this venture in the last 18 months was there was sort of international collaboration, and the big collaboration happened with Bangladesh, where I was born and brought up. And I can share you there are some academic outputs from there. We have about 10 high-impact peer-reviewed publications in relation to COVID, and all these have Bangladesh involved. And because I'm a visiting professor in Jashore University of Science and Technology, through that we have a lot of papers and research, new knowledge, and in particular, this is the paper that has been accepted this week. Prevalence of long COVID symptoms in Bangladesh, a prospective cohort study, in BMJ Global Health will publish it. And literally 6 countries, people joined in to do this study. This is the largest international study on long COVID. Today we will hear from Professor Hussain, who helped a lot in terms of encouragement and getting this study on. So today there will be 4 speakers. We will hear from Jennifer Walsh, who is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Headway Kent. This is a charity that addresses the needs for people with traumatic head injury, brain injury, stroke, or living in the community. And you will hear that in the last 18 months, these people really have a raw deal. Then we'll hear from Professor David Wilkinson, who is a divisional director in University of Kent, but he's a neuropsychologist, and we have been doing research for the last decade on neuromodulation, where you change the neuronal circuit to improve neurological deficits. And importantly, he's very keen to support any venture with Bangladesh. And we'll hear from Professor Hussain, who is a professor of microbiology, as well as Vice Chancellor of the university. He has done some original work in coronavirus and led the development of Genome Center there. And I visited the university last month, and I was impressed and amazed that they almost are completely in the process of developing the Innovation Center there. And the final speaker is Dr. Catherine Finnis, who is a senior public health doctor analyst, who have kindly completed quite a large piece of work on dementia in our county. So there will be a brief report on that. We haven't yet fully digested the numbers. What does it mean? And we have a panelist. Ellen Skippens is from Norway. She is a psychomotor physiotherapist. And we have Professor Karen Saunders, who is our neurological physiotherapist, research and clinical. And she has done a lot of research with the robotics in neurology. And we have Dr. Ashraful Bari, who is a consultant neuropsychiatrist in Birmingham. So, David, if David is there, we can start with David. Professor David Wilkinson. David, you have to unmute yourself first.
Yeah, I think I have, and you might be able to see me actually. Shall I leave my camera off or on?
Yeah, you can do either. You just have a light exactly behind your head.
Yeah, I'll turn the lights off. I'm not sure what state of the room in. Hold on a sec.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Well, thank you. In some ways, I don't have much to say, really. I mean, Mo asked me to talk to you all about how our neurological research has been impacted by COVID, and in particular, the research studies we've been conducting. And the truth is, everything just stopped. Everything stopped altogether, and just remained dormant and untouched for months and months. So I'll give you a detail around that, and then maybe say something about how we're coming out the other side of it. So the work that we've been doing takes several different dimensions within the neurological community. We were just poised to begin a study in individuals with acquired brain injury who suffer from a condition known as hemianopia, which is visual field loss. We put together an intervention that will last 12 weeks based on neurostimulation. We put it together with the Kent Association for the Blind here locally in Canterbury for a 12-week protocol. That stopped. At the same time, had a Parkinson's disease intervention, again based on neuromodulation, the same technique, 3-week protocol. As we entered lockdown, of course, that just had to stop because the participants, again, were vulnerable, couldn't come out. And the university, in fact, soon after lockdown as well. We had a singing intervention at a local church group for older people who stopped coming. And of course, you know, the churches likewise closed down. The lab studies we were doing stopped. And the stakeholder meetings that we were having with people to help plan our new centre, which I'll talk about, also stopped. So, bit of a problem, really. I think the biggest disappointment was in the brain injury study that we were doing with Mo's unit, the neuro rehab unit, with the Kent Association for the Blind. So the Kent Association for the Blind shut down. So we no longer had any participants, no guidance or advice. Ophthalmology department at East Kent hospitals obviously had restrictions imposed on them very quickly, and obviously became very inwardly focused very quickly. So really just within the last month or two, we have kind of picked up as COVID has receded. Of course, the problem we have is that people are now still quite apprehensive and nervous about coming out. And when they do come out to our studies, the social distancing rules mean that the volumes are quite reduced. Certainly the neuropsychological assessments are much harder to do. And we're mindful that the dropout rate in our studies is likely to be much higher as the efficacy of the vaccine declines and people become unwell again, or people lose family and friends. We do anticipate difficulties even though we are about to get going. I think one regret that I have over this lockdown period is that certainly in those with brain injury in our hemianopic study, they lost the chance to participate in our studies during the subacute phase of their condition. And during the subacute phase of acquired brain injury, of course, the brain is often at its most plastic and responsive to treatment. So in this sense, they were protected from COVID as they needed to be, but they really weren't best protected from the longer-term disability of brain injury. The same extends to our Parkinson's group, but in some way the problem is bigger with this group because the more advanced cases of Parkinson's, as you will know, usually ensure a poor quality of life than many people who just have a pure hemianopia. Their mood and well-being is particularly vulnerable. At the start of COVID, we were just developing plans to open the world's first ever clinical research and education centre for Parkinson's disease that incorporates non-invasive, non-drug therapies. And provide this under one roof that offers individualised care and has a research portfolio, an educational portfolio wrapped around it. Once the centre is open, it will become a template across the UK, and for our Bangladeshi friends who are on this call, we anticipate rolling out this clinical research and education centre in Bangladesh too, where the needs of people with Parkinson's are no less great than they are here in the UK. So as we look ahead to our programme of neurological research, we will need to rationalise our plans, undertake only the most important work to minimise the disrupting effect of COVID. As people become sick, supply chain issues affect the provision of consumables and other equipment that we need. And of course, there's the spectre of a further lockdown. So our studies will become much more patient focused, and the mechanistic and other lab studies that sit behind all of our work will just have to wait, which is of course a problem. We'll try and maintain a number of our meetings online, but of course you can't do many clinical assessments online, and it's harder for people with neurodisability to interact online. So it's really quite limiting even now for us. I think the final point I'll make is that on a much brighter note, COVID does seem to have emboldened many people's community spirit, and it does seem to have increased many people's appetite for helping one another and understanding one another's needs. And such an outlook can only be good for research studies that likewise seek to improve outcome and well-being within the community. So I think there was a silver lining there that we can potentially harness. I think in view of the time, I'll probably stop there, Mo.
Right, thank you. I don't know whether anyone will have any comment on what David has said, whilst we are trying to get our other speakers joining in. Right, okay.
I'm happy to just make a brief comment because I agree with David. I'm in the planning design stages for my postdoctoral PhD research, and I'll be doing the research with people living with long-term traumatic brain injury. So the new challenge now is to set up and design the research so that you don't have to be in the same room with the person, so that any risk of transmission of COVID-19 is eliminated. So previously, prior to the pandemic, to actually speak with and interview an individual safely in a room would have been fine, but now there would be a risk there. To eliminate the risk, the challenge is to move everything onto telephones, which is possible, and also video based technologies. But as David rightly points out, it's harder for someone with a brain injury to learn how to use a video-based technology compared to someone potentially without a brain injury. So it's brought new challenges into research that weren't there before, across the board, really. So in the planning design stages, things have to be designed differently because there has to be no risks attached to participants, and works both ways with researchers as well.
Thanks, Karen, for this comment. Yeah, it's true that now there is real risk of selection bias coming in, so that particularly for our neurologically disabled patients, some of them will not be able to join in with the various studies. And also in terms of service, the backlog is so long, and the community dwelling people with head injury or brain injury, there was really near shutdown of the service. I don't know whether Jennifer Walsh has managed to join in or not. She will talk about this very difficult situation that we're all going through now. I think whilst Karen, if you could see whether Jenny has joined in or not, we can go to the other presentation, which will be a video, so hopefully it will work. Sound.
Pleased to be presenting our Dementia Analytical Report 2021. I'm Catherine Finnis, a Senior Public Health Intelligence Analyst at the Kent Public Health Observatory, and I'm joined by my two colleagues tonight, Sophie Rigg, Public Health Intelligence Analyst, and Chris Brooke, Public Health Information Officer. So the plan for this presentation is a very brief epidemiology of dementia, followed by a look into the methodology that we use to do the analysis, the pathway that we use to present our analysis, have a quick look at the prevalence of dementia, pathway steps, so elements such as preventing well, diagnosing well, living well, supporting well, and dying well, and COVID-19 and its effects with dementia, recommendations following this analytical report, and finally questions and our email addresses for questions outside this evening. So dementia has been the leading cause of death in the UK until the pandemic, when in 2020 COVID-19 became the leading cause of death in England and Wales. It's the only disease in the top 10 causes of death without a cure or prevention. Due to our ageing population, we expect many more cases of dementia. There are currently around 850,000 people with dementia in the UK. This is projected to reach 1.6 million people by 2040. Many carers, both unpaid family carers and paid carers, are needed to assist people with dementia. There are estimated to be over 670,000 people in the UK acting as primary unpaid carers for people with dementia who provide care to a value of £13.9 billion a year. This is projected to increase to £35.7 billion by 2040. Dementia is significantly more prevalent in older age groups. However, dementia can affect younger ages, with over 42,000 under 65-year-olds in the UK. In the next slide, you can see the commonest 4 subtypes of dementia currently in the UK, and that's Alzheimer's disease, 50 to 75%, which often coexist with vascular dementia, up to 20% of pure vascular dementia, 10 to 15% are dementia with Lewy bodies, and 2% are FTD or frontotemporal dementia. Over to Chris.
Thank you, Kathy. So for this section, I'll be discussing the methodology that we use throughout the report. So the 3 main data sources we've used were hospital episode statistics, also known as HES data. Next, we used Public Health England's data via fingertips and the Office of National Statistics, where we used population counts. Primarily, we used R, which is a statistical programming language we used to create direct standardized rates, as well as we created many of the charts that you'll see throughout the report and this presentation. Direct standardized rates allows us to see the differences on a level playing fields between age, sex, and different deprivation groups. Now back to Kathy for the next section.
So the slide in front of you shows our dementia pathway. We decided to analyse the available data on dementia based on a pathway model. For each step of the pathway, you will see there are 1 to 2 indicators shown by a rectangular box used to further describe and analyse that element of the pathway. You'll see after the rectangular boxes there are oval shapes, and within there is the result from the analysis for that indicator. Just one thing to say though is that clearly from a patient perspective the pathway is variable and may not follow any exact trajectory. The pathway used here is more to aid the analytical approach. So moving then on to the first element of the pathway is prevalence. There are several different ways of measuring prevalence. Recorded prevalence is likely to be an underestimate, as represents persons who present and are diagnosed by general practice. Next slide, please. You can understand that some people may not wish to present to a GP because they're concerned about what they might find or scared that they may have dementia. And also some people may find it hard to access, particularly people who have unequal access and inequalities in health and health services. Next slide, please. Over the last 10 years, recorded prevalence increased about 50%, as shown on this chart. Compared to rates in 2011-12, Kent was about 58% higher and England about 49% higher. And since 2015, estimated rates in Kent have been steady around an average of 0.81%, where England averaged 0.77% over this time. Next slide, please. East Kent ICP, seen here on the left, has the highest percentage of all GP registered patients with dementia, at just under 1% at 0.9%. And for over 65s, Kent has a lower rate compared to England, 9% lower. The next section on our pathway is preventing well. The likelihood of suffering dementia increases with age and with other contributing factors such as their genetic profile. There are modifiable risk factors that are amenable to change, as well as fixed risk factors that are important for awareness. Age is the biggest risk factor for any dementia, and genetics form part of the risk as a non-modifiable risk factor with differences between different dementia types. It is modifiable risk factors that we're going to concentrate on today, with the main focus on vascular disease risk factors. Vascular dementia carries the same risk profile as many other manifestations of vascular disease. Stroke and cardiovascular disease are in themselves risk factors for developing vascular dementia. Next slide, please. So this is a slide on the recorded smoking prevalence by place-based partnerships and the percentage of patients recorded on the GP QOF, which is the Quality Outcome Framework registers, as being current smokers aged 15 and over for the year 2019-20. The England average smoking prevalence, as you can see, is 16.5%, which is lower than both Medway and Swale, which is nearly 19%, and East Kent at 17.6%. The next slide is on physical inactivity by adults, that is defined as the percentage of adults aged 19 and over that are physically inactive, defined as less than 30 minutes of physical activity every week. And this is shown for the year 2019-20. You can see there is wide variation between districts in the percentage of adults who are physically inactive, with just 14.3%, or nearly 1 in 6, in Canterbury, to Gravesham at 28.5%, or nearly 1 in 3. The average across Kent is 21.6% compared to England, which is higher at 22.9. And the next slide, please. And this slide shows the adults classified as overweight or obese by district, over 18 for the year 2019-20. The majority of all adults over 18 years old are overweight or obese, with a range of 57.4% in Tunbridge Wells to 72.2% in Gravesham. The average in Kent is 64.3%, which is higher than the England average of 62.8%. I'll hand over to Chris now, please.
Thank you, Kathy. So this section is on diagnosing well, where I'll be discussing the estimated dementia diagnosis rate for people aged 65 and over, where the Kent average was 56%. So this chart, so the estimated diagnosis rate shows the rate of people aged 65 plus with a recorded dementia diagnosis per person estimated to have dementia. The estimated diagnosis, the estimated dementia diagnosis rate for Kent is 56%, and this is lower than the government target for 2/3 of people who are estimated to have dementia to receive a diagnosis. All 12 Kent districts have a lower rate than the 66.7% goal, with only one, Canterbury, being above the England average of 61%. Tunbridge, Malling and Gravesham are the only two districts averaging below 50%. This chart shows the estimated dementia diagnosis rate 65 plus from 2017 to 2021. As you can see, from 2017 to 2020, the rate has been roughly consistent, with it dropping considerably in 2021 down to 56%, down from 60.8 in the previous year.
The next section of the pathway is living well, and for this we looked at dementia care plans being reviewed in the next 12 months. So in Kent and Medway, 70.6% of patients with dementia had their care plan reviewed in a face-to-face review in the preceding 12 months in 2019-20. And this is a 4.4 percentage points. This is 4.4 percentage points lower than the average for England. Sittingbourne PCN had a 13% higher proportion of patients whose care plan had been reviewed compared to the England average. And that was 85.1% compared to 75%. 9 Kent and Medway PCNs had 10% or more lower percentage, and 32 PCNs had a similar percentage when compared to England. 2 PCNs showed a percentage about half of the England average.
So this next section is supporting well. I'll be discussing the direct standardised rate of emergency admissions, people aged 65 years and over per 100,000, where Kent received a score of 3,256. Next, I'll be discussing the quality rating of residential care and nursing home beds for people aged 65 and over, where Kent received a score of 72.4. People with any type of dementia who are admitted to hospital for any reason have increasing rates as they get older. Kent has a lower rates than England for all age groups, although this has been increasing since 2012/2013 for the older age groups. In Kent, the most deprived age group, 65 years or more, have about 34% higher rate of emergency admissions compared to the least deprived group. In England, overall, this percentage is about 90%. The rate of dementia-related emergency admissions for Kent residents overall has been steadily increasing, parallel to but about 10% lower than the England average until the most recent year, 2020/2021. This gap closed and rates fell considerably with an 11% decline in Kent. Admission rates in younger Kent residents under the age of 50 have generally been well below the national levels, on average between 25 and 100% less. Males have a higher emergency admission rates than females in the age groups of 50 to 64 in Kent. However, females have a higher rate in 65 plus and 80 plus age groups. Next, back over to Sophie.
Yep, so for Alzheimer's disease in Kent, the emergency admissions have increased in all age groups since 2012-13. Females have higher admission rates than males in the 65 plus group, but similar rates in the 80 plus group. For vascular dementia, the admission rates have been increasing in the 50 to 64, 65 plus and 80 plus groups since 2012. Males have higher admission rates than females in the 50 to 64 group from 2012-13 onwards until the latest data point where they are similar. For alcohol-related dementias, the emergency admission rates in Kent are low but steadily increasing in the 3 older age groups. Next slide, please. So the last section on the pathway is dying well. And for this, we looked at the direct standardised rate of mortality and death in the usual place of residence. Next slide, please. The mortality rate for people with dementia in Kent, age 65 plus, was 829 per 100,000 in 2019, which is a similar rate to England. In 2019, 70% of deaths of people aged 65 plus with dementia were in the usual place of residence, and this is a similar proportion to England.
So COVID-19 and the effect on dementia. During the first and second waves, dementia and Alzheimer's disease were the leading cause of death in female care home residents, and dementia and Alzheimer's disease was the most common pre-existing condition found among deaths due to COVID-19 in both female and male care home residents in wave 1 and wave 2. And concerningly, long COVID, which has become characterised recently by the WHO, has been suggested at causing memory problems. This can both affect people who have a diagnosis for dementia and people who are yet to be diagnosed, potentially hastening their diagnosis. Moreover, there are continuing concerns among the scientific community regarding the effects of COVID-19 on the brain. From Nature, infection with the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 can cause memory loss, strokes and other effects on the brain. It will need to be reviewed in the future as the picture becomes clearer whether COVID will lead to more cases of vascular dementia due to the microvascular clotting nature of the disease or Alzheimer's disease. It is clear, however, that people with dementia were unequally affected in severe outcomes from COVID-19, possibly due to exposure risk from care and nursing homes, as well as overall risk from the condition due to the burden of comorbidity. And in the next chart that you see, the emergency hospital admissions for people with dementia was highest in the year 2019-20 at 11,174, with a reduction of 10% to 9,992 in the pandemic year of 2020-21. Interestingly, though, the percentage of emergency admissions involving dementia was 5% greater in the latest year, despite admission counts being lower. So recommendations following this analytical report are: due to the current nature and treatment options for dementia, it is often that much of the dementia pathway concentrates on care rather than other things such as prescribed medication. This report was limited by the data available at the time, and it is recommended that a future analysis is undertaken to include matters on care and, importantly, carers. For example, indicators such as the number of informal carers for people with dementia within Kent, with an analysis showing sex, age and deprivation if possible. This report deals only with the analysis of emergency hospital admissions rather than the quality of care given. This needs to be triangulated with other sources of information such as the National Audit in Dementia Care in General Hospitals Audit, which is carried out yearly by the Royal Society of Psychiatrists. This report does not discuss social matters impacting dementia, such as housing needs and domiciliary, residential, nursing or EMI care, and it is recommended that a future report tries to assess this. It is recommended that as the pandemic response develops further, analyses are carried out in the future, both to assess the impact of COVID-19 on the prevalence of dementia and also to assess the effect on emergency hospital admissions. In addition, the effect of COVID-19 will need to be assessed across the whole suite of potential risk factors. So thank you very much for listening to our report and for inviting us tonight. Our emails are below. We're sorry we can't be with you, but our emails are below. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. It's catherine.finnis@kent.gov.uk, sophie.rigg@kent.gov.uk, and chris.brook@kent.gov.uk. Thank you. Good night.
Right. Thank God it was a video rather than trying to connect to the IT WebEx. I got messages that the two other speakers are trying to connect. We have the panelists and our chief guest connected. So there's a lot of data from this dementia report. It's actually hot off the press. We haven't yet met to discuss the findings and the ramifications. Some of the data is only presented here. But one thing to be noted is diagnosis rate is almost 57% for Kent. But if you see the towns and cities, there are actually quite a wide variation even within this. And the national standard is to Alzheimer's disease international standard is to have a diagnosis of at least 60% of patients, which they estimate for low and middle income countries to be as low as 10%. But even 57% is not something which we should be complacent about. Right. Okay. So I think we'll wait whether our two other speakers could join in or not. I was really looking forward to listen to Professor Hussain, who would have given some fantastic insight in where the future is going as far as COVID pandemic and the coronavirus and the various variations that are coming up, and some advanced information we have got from him. So I think instead of giving, I know one or two comments or findings from these new studies that they have done, but probably we will reserve it for our future program so that Professor Hussain can present the whole data, and we can have more microbiologists in the audience. So I think we can open the session for anyone to make any comment, and I'll request the three panelists to kindly put on the video on and say their section, to say something from their side. I don't know whether Karen managed to get Jennifer Walsh to try to rejoin. Jennifer is actually in the same hospital building, but we thought it would be better if she joins from her department rather than everyone in the same innovation center. We're already 5 of us here. Right. I think I'll request the 3 panelists to say their things. Yeah. So Dr. Ashraf Ulbari from Birmingham.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening to Honorable Education Minister from Bangladesh, Dr. Dipu Moni, and all the respected guests. Fantastic presentation. I think being a neuropsychiatrist, I particularly focus on the psychological aspect of the COVID-19. And I think it's fascinating to see those sort of those sort of researches that are taking places and obstacles. I'm very impressed with the enthusiasm to keep the focus and to fight against this pandemic from different angles, and how to overcome those profound impacts on our society. I'm very keen to do some of the presentation in the coming webinars, possibly, especially from psychological perspective and the neuropsychiatric perspective, how we can actually manage the profound impacts that has happened in every aspect of us, particularly from emotional aspect, and how we should actually manage this. And thank you all those presenters and the honorable guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bari. Can I muse actually with you about one point? I do get one question by a lot of people that, that coronavirus, it affects the nose and the olfactory system, so the smell system. Now, anyone who is in neuroscience will know that Parkinson's disease, frontotemporal dementia, even Alzheimer's dementia probably starts from damage to that system predating by several years. So is this a real risk that a decade after this, suddenly we will see a large number of dementia and Parkinson's disease, notwithstanding the fact that for the last decade, Alzheimer's dementia was decreasing in Western Europe? But do you anticipate the trend to be reversed in the coming days?
Very interesting thought. I think the overall impact of COVID-19 on human being in different systems is still, the pattern of COVID on us is very unclear. The pathophysiology is very unclear at this stage, but I think it's fair to actually recognize that the impact on smell and especially in the front part of the brain, which is consistently evident in over the course of COVID over the last 2 years. I'll be quite keen to see what happens in future, but very sorry to make any comment at this stage.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, definitely it was quite clear that the people who have dementia suffered a lot more, in fact died a lot more as well, and they couldn't come to the hospital. They definitely were having comorbid illness, and the isolation will have more profound impact, stressing impact on them. But I think I have mentioned it to the Alzheimer's Disease International and WHO meeting recently that probably there needs to be a plan to handle larger number of dementia coming up in not just in lower and middle income countries, but also in Western Europe as well. Right. Okay. If I could request Elin Skipenes to kindly say something. Elin, thank you for having.
Hello, good evening. You hear me?
Yeah, we can. We can see and hear you clearly.
It's nice to meet up and reflect together as humans, as we said in the start, and that we are all in the same boat. We experienced the COVID together. And I want to say congratulations for the larger study that's accepted. You still hear me?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
Congratulations for the study. I would love to read it. I was thinking about what David said about the difficulties for all the research, that people are nervous to attend for research, and there is high dropouts, and people get fear and anxiety to participate in research. And also think about when we want to protect the patients against the COVID, then they become more isolated, and that it will affect the rehabilitation, intensity of the rehabilitation. That means that we can't achieve as good rehabilitation for people with, for example, brain injuries and strokes. And I think for physiotherapists and other health persons, there is a mix between the technology that we have been quite good in with all the meetings, so we can make the work become less, and we can reach the patient that lives far away. But also we have less physical meeting, less hands-on, and that also will affect the rehabilitation situation. So yeah. And for me as a psychomotor physiotherapist, we work holistic, and we know that anxiety and fear affects the rehabilitation, of course. It affects balance, sleeping problems, quality of movements, and the confidence. So the cost of the COVID, it's not easy to know in the long term either with rehabilitation perspective. So I think that's, yeah. We have learned a lot with technology, but we also have lost the thing being near patients. So yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, it's true that my own patients, I know people who needed Botox in the clinic. A lot of those patients or their relatives were so scared that they wouldn't come for the service, and a lot of unnecessary pain and muscle loss, joint range of motion lost were lost because of this. And so we all needed to do extra clinics to catch up with that backlog. So it's not in the, we hear the headlines of how many people have died, but we don't hear how many people are suffering or have suffered, and unnecessary disability, despite having the service and the clinicians available. And of course, David pointed out the research was almost decimated. I mean, non-COVID research, that is. So thanks, Elin, for joining and being patient with us. If I could request Karen Saunders, Professor Karen Saunders, to say her bits, please. Yeah, to unmute. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. It has been, a long time for people who have vulnerabilities. So people who have dementia, who have brain injuries, people living in the community to be able to access the treatment that they have needed after society has gradually reopened. So the longer term health issues are greater, and the waiting lists it's very, very difficult for recovery, and we understand that the system is in recovery and continues to work to support people as best as possible. And I think that's why there's also an opportunity to really think about innovative ways of doing things, because the demand in services continues to increase. So there has to be some ways of thinking about how can we do things more efficiently, which is very, very challenging, because there's still a lot of work being done clinically to support patients. So I think my reflection in terms of the research would be that it has completely changed the research landscape. The majority of research now that's taking place is related to COVID-19. So it's become more difficult for people who are doing research that isn't related to COVID-19. So the funding is more difficult to get. And certainly during the pandemic period, there was, a whole range of sort of funding organisations that started offering, funding grants specifically for COVID research, which is totally understandable in the circumstances. But it also means that any other research is pushed to the side, a little bit like Professor Wilkinson was talking about earlier. So I think the recovery of the research side that's not COVID related will take longer. And also the point that I was making earlier is that people coming into research now are, they have different decision-making processes. So whereas previously someone would have traveled to come in and have an appointment and be, fairly, satisfied with taking part in a clinical research trial. There's a lot more kind of like background consideration to be done, really. And it's just even for the person themselves traveling, because if they're traveling to a venue, there's risks attached to that travel that weren't there previously. So it's introduced a whole range of like new factors for potential participants, as well as people setting up the trial. So it kind of mirrors what David was saying before. So it's a different research landscape on both sides.
Thanks, Karen, for your reflection. I think it's quite late, getting quite late. I would request our chief guest to say something about her reflections, and then we'll come to our chief executive. It's an honor to request our chief guest, Dr. Dipu Moni, to kindly say something. Yeah, thank you.
I'm really happy to be here with you this evening. It's quite late in Dhaka. It's 1 in the morning actually, and then I have to be up by 5 again to leave Dhaka for one of the districts in the north. I have to go there for a meeting very early in the morning. So and that's why I'm sorry I'm speaking earlier than I'm supposed to. I hope you'd understand. It's a great honor and pleasure to join this live research and education conference in Kent. I understand that this is the 5th of its kind in the current series on the theme of the unequal impact of the COVID pandemic on vulnerable groups. This is the second one, second such event in this series that I have joined, and it is very encouraging to know that despite the continued increase in numbers of COVID-19 cases in the UK and many other countries around the world, that this unique series of learning events has continued. Opportunities to look outside of our everyday lives are there, and these events offer everyone an opportunity to consider what other people are doing and who the different kinds of vulnerable people and groups in society are. I would ask everyone attending to take some time to reflect on how they can change what they are doing on an everyday basis to support vulnerable individuals and groups that they may not commonly encounter. I would like to thank and congratulate Dr. Mohamed Sakel for organizing this series of events and for giving me this opportunity to participate. I'm aware that Dr. Sakel is the chairman of Kent Brain Injury Foundation charity, which has already contributed to raising awareness of how dementia care could be improved in Bangladesh. We know that different groups have different needs, and it is important to gain a broader understanding of the nature of these needs and what can be done to potentially offer support. I understand that some of the international advisors from Kent Brain Injury Foundation charity are here this evening in support of this program. Professor David Wilkinson, Professor Karen Saunders, and Dr. Mohamed Ashraful Bari. It is also a pleasure to welcome a friend from Norway, a guest from Norway, Elin Skippernes, to the invited panel for the first time. We appreciate that the panel of guests are all very senior people and have different professional backgrounds, which enable a richness and diversity of perspectives and reflections to be gained. It was very impressive to note the dementia report by Dr. Kathy Finnis that analyzed the dementia situation in Kent County of UK. It seems overall the diagnosis rate is almost 60%, which I believe has been the international target. The recent WHO Dementia 2021 report identified better diagnosis as one of the 7 global action plans. I believe the Alzheimer's Disease International recently estimated that in the lower middle income countries, diagnosis rate is still around 10%. Public awareness programs need to be ramped up so that a neurological diagnosis of dementia is made to reduce the stigma of unexplained psychiatric illness. I'm very interested to hear about the different topics in the program and look forward to understanding more about what Bangladesh can learn in these areas and how we can better support knowledge transfer, education, and learning opportunities related to these issues in Bangladesh. I'm very happy that my good friend, Dr. Sakel, is doing all these great work. And I'm very happy to continue to support his continuing research, education, and clinical ventures in both the United Kingdom and Bangladesh. And I thank everyone present here today. And I must leave now, but I'd very much like to have an opportunity to see the reports that or the papers that are being presented today. I'd very much like that if it could be done. If you could share these the reports with me, I'd very much appreciate that. So thank you again, all of you, and see you soon again, hopefully, in the next event. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for kindly staying up so late. Thank you.
I would have stayed for as long as you needed me to. The only thing is that I didn't anticipate that I would have to leave Dhaka very early tomorrow morning, or today morning actually. It's already 20th in Dhaka, and I have to leave in 5 hours. So that means I'll get less than 4 hours to sleep. That's why I have to leave. I'm really sorry, but otherwise I would have stayed back till the end.
Thank you. Thank you for your encouragement.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye. Yeah. Right. Thank you. I think the floor is now open for anyone to make a comment. And so after that, our Chief Executive, Susan Aykut, will make some comments to close the program. Oh, and our host, Mr. Shashi, will also say something, I'm sure. Right. Okay, I think. Okay. Yeah. Let's Susan Aykut to kindly wrap up the program.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Sashi. Thanks, everybody. I found that really fascinating and interesting, and I have to say I just think it's amazing that we can connect people from different countries at the present time to just understand and I think just have a sort of a shared sense of similar challenges and similar pressures, very similar to really what Ellen was saying earlier. So I think it's just lovely to see everybody. Really interesting. It makes me feel very humble, I have to say, to have such fabulous colleagues who are willing just to come together across the globe to just share. And I just have to say that I'm going into my Friday evening feeling very humble, but also inspired by how our globe has kind of been touched, sometimes in a bad way, by COVID, but it reminds us we're all connected, I think, at the end of the day, and really appreciate your shared mission to try and improve care for all of our patients. So thank you very much and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. The credit goes to Dr. Sakel, who's been doing incredible amount of work. His vision, his dream of helping the underprivileged, his drive, which is undying for advancement. And he's able to have that magic in bringing people together. We want to thank everyone for joining us. This is just the beginning. We're looking forward to great steps ahead. I mean, Professor Karen Saunders, you're going to be starting some big research, really good stuff, going to the next level in terms of all these. You want to announce that a little bit, or you want to keep it on the low? Just it's exciting stuff you're going to be doing, Karen. If you just say a few words, and then that will bring some positive energy.
Yeah, no, delighted to. Thanks, Sashi. Yeah, I'm just literally about to submit a protocol for my PhD research, which is looking at supporting people living with traumatic brain injury in the community and inviting them to identify what their long-term health issues are after brain injury. So initially looking at speaking with them, so doing qualitative research by telephone, then analysing the data to identify what their health issues are after brain injury. And then in the second stage, inviting people into a co-production process. So that will be people living with brain injury. And that will be virtual online. So that will be very small groups. So maybe about 4 participants, potentially being supported through video-based technology to look at what's come out of stage 1 and to consider what they think would be useful for them to develop that they could use at home. So some kind of resource that would enable them to better manage their health needs at home because it is known from the research that brain injury is for life, and certainly moderate to severe brain injury, people are living with symptoms that may be related to anxiety, it may be related to emotional problems, may be related to fatigue, physical issues. So if there's something that they can think about that they would actually want to help design together, then that's going to be the second stage. So so it is a really, really big project and it's very exciting, but we're moving ahead with the support of Headway Kent. So Jenny.
So
thank you. I think
this is
also
incredible news, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is
so
just one example.
Service development through co-production and influenced by actual service users. But in addition to that, you could have also mentioned the brain-computer interface study that's coming up, where it can be conducted, this sort of high technology research, but it can be conducted during the pandemic, so that we can actually improve patients' sleep and pain who has suffered from an injury to the brain from stroke and other conditions. And it can be done whilst a lockdown, even if there is a lockdown. So yeah, I think with that, shall we wrap up today's program? Thank you for everyone, and again for the IT. It wasn't a disaster, but I think
it's they apparently upgraded the system. We weren't aware, but it's great. It's great to see everyone. Have a safe trip. Thank you everyone. Susan, David, Ellen from from very far, of all the international faculty. Really nice to meet you. We have some young ones in here who are working with Mo as well. Thank you everyone, and stay safe. All the best.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
how do you